Guys, how are you?
Hi.
So I know you're covering the vice president here. I figured I'd come by and one, just get a good look at the plane, because hopefully it's going to be my plane in a few months. But I also thought you guys might get lonely because the vice president doesn't answer questions from reporters and hasn't for 17 days. Have they given you guys an explanation for why she won't take questions from reporters? No? Nobody? Okay, great. Well, I hope that she changes her mind, because it'd be good for the American people, and I think it'd be good for you all if she actually ran a real campaign instead of one from a basement with a teleprompter. So have a good one, guys. See ya.
What would you like to hear from her?
I'd love her to answer the questions. I'd love her to just answer what she wants to do, and also explain why every single position she has changed. She pretends to be a prosecutor, yet she pretends to be a tough on crime prosecutor, and yet here she is wanting to defund the police. She's the border czar, yet she's opened up the American southern border. This is a person who has to answer the questions from the media, and it's disgraceful that she runs from you guys. It's also insulting to the American people. But anyway, we're gonna go do our event. I appreciate you guys being here. I wish she paid you some more attention. See ya.
Hey, and welcome back to the channel, everyone. Hope everyone was having a fantastic day. Today we're going to be talking about how terrible Tim Walz is, how he allowed Minneapolis to get burnt to the ground, how countless businesses burnt to the ground, minority-owned businesses, and they still haven't recovered to this day. So let's jump right into it, y'all.
Walz was the governor of Minnesota during the violent George Floyd riots back in 2020. Businesses were looted and set on fire, destroyed. Police officers assaulted, and the country watched in horror as the city of Minneapolis was burning to the ground. Walz was pressured to send in the National Guard, but he stalled and admitted he did not act fast enough when citizens of his own state begged him for help.
I got a call from a friend and a dedicated public servant. Senator Torres Ray called in her district, and it was on fire. And there weren't any police there. There weren't any firefighters. There was no social control, and her constituents were locked in their house wondering what they were going to do. That is an abject failure that cannot happen. If the issue is that the state should have moved faster, yeah, that is on me.
Abject failure is right. Republican Vice President candidate J.D. Vance pointing out that Kamala Harris didn't take action during those riots either. And maybe that's why they're a match.
When the police are not empowered to do their job, it is the most vulnerable people in our communities who suffer. We saw that, of course, in 2020 with the summer riots with our new vice presidential nominee on the Democratic side. Makes an interesting dynamic duo with Kamala Harris, because as he was promoting rioters and looters burning down the city of Minneapolis, Kamala Harris was helping to bail the rioters and looters out of jail. A really vicious cycle if you're living in that community, a really vicious cycle if you own one of those businesses that was burned down, and of course a very vicious cycle if you're one of the poor kids who needs law and order, who needs common sense safety, but doesn't have access to it because our government so often refuses to do its job.
And by our government, Harris, he means Governor Walz. And I want to point out something and get your thoughts on something in particular, which is that when he talks about the vulnerable communities there that were disproportionately affected and remain affected to this day, they are, in fact, disproportionately communities of color.
This is a guy who allowed communities to burn for days, didn't act, wouldn't bring in the National Guard. He didn't act until 3 days later, after a lot of political pressure. I mean, here he is talking about equity and inclusion being at the center of it, which is total insanity. Y'all check it out.
That does not put equity and inclusion at the center of it is certainly going to eventually come to the places where we're at. This is a moment of inflection. It's a moment of real change. It's a moment that those folks who are out there demanding this are not going to take a commission or a report. They're going to want fundamental change.
This clown essentially encouraged all this to happen. I mean, he essentially stated himself that they ain't going to stop until there was fundamental change, and he all but encouraged it. Truly disgusting. Just like his wife in this next clip talking about burning tire smell.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
That's probably right up there as stupid as the next thing Tampon Waltz said in this next clip.
I want to say, first of all, I myself can fully understand the rage. I spoke this evening to George Floyd's siblings quite extensively. I understand that rage. We've talked about it. We understand what has to happen.
Those people wasn't grieving. George Floyd was a felon. They didn't know him. They just did it because they felt like it. They ruined businesses. I mean, do you understand what you're saying, Tampon Tim? Between you and Kamala Harris, y'all instigated all that. She had a Minnesota Freedom Fund that she had supported on her X account that she still has up to this day. That's the next thing I want to get into with y'all. Y'all check out this clip.
Having been jailed on domestic violence charges, George Howard posted an $11,500 bail. He did it with the support of the Minnesota Freedom Fund. Now, one of those bailed out was George Howard, August the 6th. A few weeks later, there was a road rage incident. Damian Ortiz was shot and killed. Howard was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The Minnesota Freedom Fund acknowledged supporting Howard's bail.
That's just truly disturbing, y'all. Y'all check out Kamala Harris's tweet for the Minnesota Freedom Fund, where she says, if you're able to, chip in now at Minnesota Freedom Fund. And that's why this ticket should never be allowed anywhere near the White House. I mean, they'll have this entire country burned to the ground. And these two fools support open borders. They're as progressive come. I mean, if they got anywhere near that White House, you can bet that the United States of America as we know it would be gone forever. You think that you can't afford food now? Wait till they get in there to ruin it even more than it already is. Not to mention the crime that they're going to allow. Anyway, so if you can recall back to 2020, if you can remember, Kayleigh McEnany was the White House press secretary. Hear what she has to say went on during all this rioting and looting and how this piece of crap handled all this.
Let me just go back for a moment to the summer of 2020. I was in the White House with President Trump. It was a trying time for any leader. It was a testing period for any leader. I remember standing on Air Force One with him in his private office the first time he saw the George Floyd footage. I watched a leader. I watched someone who watched that moment and said, this is terrible. I want to bring the country together. You needed unity and you needed resolve. And he went on to NASA, and before he made his remarks before SpaceX launched, he talked in a very important, impactful way about the moment we were at. And then he exhibited leadership and called for law and order in the country. What did Tim Walz do? Tim Walz let the image on your screen, that burning, he let Minneapolis burn for days. He delayed in calling out the National Guard. I stood at the podium in June 29th of 2020 and talked about the failed governor of Minnesota, this man who did not exhibit leadership. Donald Trump wanted to morally heal our country, and then he wanted to instill law and order. And what he enabled was the second largest local unrest in American history, in modern American history. So much so you had 1,500 businesses burn, $500 million in property damage. And the police chief there said, never in my 30-year experience of multiple events of high-risk civil unrest that included mass looting, indiscriminate arson, and sounds of gunshot, direct violence of this nature. These events over the last 72 hours absolutely overwhelmed public safety. At a time when we have global unrest with Iran all around the world, you want the guy who enabled unrest in Minneapolis and in Minnesota? Why did Kamala make this pick? What a failure. That image should play in every Trump ad from now to November.
That's all I got for you guys. If you would, drop me a like, comment, subscribe. It would really help my channel out. It would also help with the YouTube algorithm to help get it pushed to others. Until next time, y'all stay safe. Peace out.